All right. What's up, y'all? As always, welcome to another live stream. Tonight, we're going to be addressing the racist statements of Ellen White, as well as the Adventist Church's pathetic attempts to spin and defend them, if you will. I recently uploaded a video about this, and as expected, Adventists showed up with the same tired excuses they inherited from the SDA Church by way of F.D. Nichol, who in the 1951, wrote a book titled Amalgamation, where he attempted to address these embarrassing statements by Ellen White. So we're going to get into the details of this, how he was influenced by Dr. Marsh in the 1950s and the tensions that were rising within the SDA Church due to these statements. Adventist apologists want you to think that we're the clueless critics. Liars who are misrepresenting what she said, haven't read her fully, making connections where there are none, and so on. But is this the case? Tonight, we're going to see who has and hasn't done their homework, and who is being honest about the facts, and who's simply parroting the script that they have been fed by the Adventist industrial complex. Okay? Because one side is actually looking at the full scope of things, the evolution, no pun intended, of how this has changed over the years and how the 1950s was a pivotal time, but the Adventist Church was not born in the 1950s. So remember that. With me to discuss, always a pleasure to have these two guys here with me. They are not strangers to the show. Pastor E.J. Thunder Lauriston, CMB the Ambassador. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. How are we doing?
Blessings, bro. Doing well. It's good to be here with you again, and of course with CMB, who wonderful brothers in the Lord I love and love to work with. I love to have these discussions and conversations with about biblical, theological issues, and of course issues surrounding Adventism, contrasting with historical Christianity. It's good to see you all again, brothers.
Always stoked to have you guys here. How you doing, CMB?
Doing great, brothers. I'm glad to be here tonight. What's up to everybody in the chat? I see some people from all over the place. I see Joey from England. I see someone from Ireland as well, too. Someone from Idaho.
Let's go.
And other places in the United States and worldwide. So God bless you all. Love to see you. Love to hang out with you, brothers, man. Tonight is going to be a little rough, but we'll make it through, God willing. So it'll be all right.
Totally. It's funny, real quick, it's funny you mention Ireland and these other places. Mm-hmm. Answering Adventism has crossed 25 countries as of last week, I think it was. 25 countries. 25 countries. It's just crazy to think about, because it's like I'm a guy here, in my bonus room at my house, who's just kind of passionate about reaching Seventh-day Adventists, and then I'm able to reach 25 countries of people, or we are rather. It's not even just me. There's a collective unit involved in that. So praise God. So we're going to start by reading a few comments, though, folks. Before we get into a presentation that CMB is going to give, I want to respond to a few of the comments on the recent video I uploaded for people to see themselves some of these common defenses, as well as a quote from SDA pioneer Uriah Smith regarding Ellen White's amalgamation statements. Now, we're going to be looking at more quotes tonight than just the amalgamation quotes, because there are plenty. But I want to look at that before we get going as well. And like I said, after that, CMB is going to take the reins. He's going to present. We're going to look at those quotes as well as a number of others. And then we'll discuss some of the historical development as well that led to the current defenses that the SDA Church uses. So with that being the case, let's look at the first comments. So this guy has two comments. Anthony, he says, spiritual things are spiritually understood. If one carefully read the statement pertaining to the amalgamation of man and beast, one would understand aright what the statement is conveying. We all know that the coupling of a human and a beast cannot bring forth an animal nor a human, neither a creature being part human and part beast. Well, one thing I'll say here is I didn't even get into that aspect in my video. So I expected all of them to show up again with the script and just anytime this topic's mentioned, what are the talking points? Bump, just throw them out. I didn't even bring up creating a hybrid whatever in the video. So he's just throwing out one of the common expectations that people are going to say, which we're going to get into this tonight to see if that is what she's actually saying. But then he continues. Again, the idea of whites having their congregation for whites and blacks having their congregation for blacks is misunderstood. Consider the era back then when racism was rampant. The counsel was given that the word needed to be given to the white persons as well as the black person, and since slavery was also horrible, there will be mistrust between blacks and whites, which would have been a stumbling block to a person's salvation. That's the reason for the separate congregations back then, but it should not be so now, because there's no Jew or Gentile with God. No black nor white, nor greater or lesser human being, free made us all, Psalm 100. We just need to gain the right understanding of the writings, and God can give us such. Well, at least you rightly recognized, Anthony, that the fact that there's a black conference and a white conference does not mirror the kingdom of God. That there shouldn't be such a thing, and the fact that there still is today should send up at least somewhat of a red flag. But, EJ, what are your thoughts on, if you carefully read the statement, that's not what she's saying. Now, he doesn't get into the specific defenses here like some of these other commenters were, but what are your thoughts on that? Are we not reading things carefully?
Of course, we read them carefully, and every Seventh-day Adventist before 1947 into 1951 who read Ellen White's statements carefully, they unanimously understood them the same way as well. And so when she first made the statement in 1864, and then coming down through to 1931 was the first time they tried to reinterpret it. An Adventist by the name of George McCready Price, he first suggested, in order to make it more palatable and agree with what science was understanding better than that animals and humans can't procreate, he was the one who first suggested that they add amalgamation of man and of beast as a means of making it what this guy is saying here. And so again, it is not us who is misreading the statement or not reading it carefully. Everyone unanimously for the 83 years of the existence of this statement from 1864 through to 1947, 1951, it was unanimous. It meant man and humans interbred and produced certain races of people.
Yeah.
That's how it was universally understood in Adventism, universally defended, until science was refuting them and showing otherwise. Then they started to try what is happening now. And so we have read it carefully, all of them. It is them who haven't properly read it and who are just parroting the reinterpretation, which we get into as we go into the program.
Well, that's what I think is so funny. And folks, we're going to look at these quotes tonight, so you're going to see we're not just talking out the sides of our neck here. But the irony of this comment, it's like, Anthony, then everyone in your denomination for like 90 years didn't know how to read it, apparently. They were all clueless. They were all lost. Your whole denomination was lost on this topic until the 50s. Okay. Busefulness, I don't know. But that was this person's YouTube name. Again, rather long comments here, has a couple of them. He says, this is the worst interpretation of her writing, and deliberately so. She wrote the amalgamation of man and beast, not the amalgamation of man with beast. This guy's been reading the ADL article or FD Nichol's book. Two entirely very, very different things. Learn to read English properly. A bit of a challenge for Americans. How so many get this wrong, I'll never know. So many think that the giants came from the union of fallen angels and humans, in direct contradiction of the Bible. Christ said that there was no marriage between angels and heaven, and yet somehow they could down here? Really? Why did they stop? None of this had to do with my video, by the way. Why aren't they still doing it now and giants abound? It's because the sons of God were those that worshiped God, and the daughters of the sons of men were those who did not worship God. Genesis 6:2 has no connection with Genesis 6:4. Ever notice how the animals went into the ark, the clean animals by 7 and the unclean by 2s? If God had created everything and declared it very good, how is now one lot of animals clean and one lot unclean? Through the amalgamation of beast with beast, so this is getting into what you were saying, EJ, about the rewording of the phrase, That's why they're unclean and still are today. A lot of comments here not backed up with anything but rumor. How this woman, who was the starter of Oakwood University for African Americans in Huntsville, Alabama, in a time, 1896, and space where racism was and probably still is rife, is lambasted as a racist is beyond me. You're no scholar, no theologian, just another virtue signaler, trying to go through everything with your virtue signaling glasses with a supposed Christian tint. Try and do better and be the man Christ wants you to be. Misrepresenting something is also known as bearing false witness, the 9th of the 10 commandments. The irony of this comment. The irony. We're not going to get into a ton of the details here because we're going to save that for when we get into the presentation. But folks, I want you to see the sort of defenses that you're going to hear when you bring this up. They're all going to say these same things. You're reading it wrong. It didn't say hybrid humans. That's specifically why I didn't even mention it in the video. I only covered one aspect of the claim, which there are multiple aspects, as we will see tonight. I only covered one of them because I wanted to see if Adventists would even listen. They all commented on there. She's not talking about a hybrid human. Well, I didn't even bring that aspect up in the video. I talked about race mixing because, as you're going to see, it's also miscegenation that she was talking about, not just man with animals creating other breeds. I don't know, fellas. I'm one of these mixed race amalgamations, if you will. So maybe I'm just not smart enough to grasp what's being said. Maybe that's the issue. Then NBA 2K, 2King 670, whatever, NBA said, so when she said amalgamation, she didn't mean mixing this ethnicity with that ethnicity. Stretch. The other so-called supporting statements you pulled from another book has nothing to do with what she said about the antediluvian people. Okay, halt. Folks, in that video, the point that I was making in quoting from separate works, yes, I'm aware that the amalgamation statements were not connected directly to what the statements that she said regarding race mixing or not marrying during antebellum slavery days. That wasn't the point. The point was to show in that specific video, all this stuff is supposedly attributed to God. God is the one that said this. So at one time, if you go against God's word, that's a sin. If God tells you to do something and you go against it, that is a sin. So if God said for a specific period of time, black people can't marry white people, and you went against that, you were sinning. That's the point. Saying, oh, that was only for back then. Oh, okay. Yeah, that really helps. That's kind of like when they say, which we'll see with Genesis 6 is, oh, well, I know it was race mixing back then, but it was only back then. It was only when they were race mixing back then, as if that somehow compartmentalizes God's racism. That makes it better. He continues. That's a different subject. But when she said amalgamation of man and beast, she's not talking about mixing man and beast to create hybrid man-beast creatures. She was referencing the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. So this is the other Nichol argument here. That is the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain. And the Bible does in fact state that in Genesis 6, right before the flood, and beasts intermingling with different beasts, like ligers. So God flooded the earth because of lions and tigers mating, something he would have had to have created them to have an innate ability to do amongst their kind. That frustrated him. And so he flooded the earth because of ligers. This is lazy research or biased with a false premise already. When she talked about how white people should not marry black people, we have to remember this was during the time of extreme racism and slavery. Remember, folks, these words that she said, barricaded by a thus saith the Lord. God speaking through clay, never wrote a single sentence of heresy. They're not her own words. It's not merely the opinion of Sister White. You go against her words, you're going against the Spirit of God. That's what's in focus. Notice none of these commenters are actually, oh no, that was just wise counsel she was giving. No. This is supposed to be God speaking. She was trying to protect people, essentially those kids who are born as mixed race, because it can cause an outrage amongst the people who are already racist. For a racist white man to see a mixed race baby could be troublesome. And for one to be born mixed race at the time could be confusing to them too, as to why so much hate from a race that he or she is half of. Those times were different from our times now. Any comments on that, fellas, before moving to our, we have our last person, and then I'm going to bring out actually a real winner of some comments from another gentleman, and then we're going to transition to CMB. Any thoughts on this, folks?
I think your question or your challenge or comment anyway at the beginning was right. We're going to find out who's done their homework and who hasn't.
Yeah, I'd say. EJ, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. They never miss. They always approach you or enter the conversation, kicking down the door and
Yep.
just a bull in
Good.
a china shop
Yeah.
and throwing out all of these accusations and straw man and ad hom and the whole works until you start to unearth the contextual and historical facts to them. And then they have to eat a lot of humble pies and try to backpedal and do all kinds of spins and cognitive dissonance fuse to still try to maintain a sense of coherence. And so again, when we systematically and historically go through the facts, persons will see who's just jumping to hasty conclusions and accusations without properly studying the issue out and investigating the facts.
Yep.
Miles, real quick.
Go ahead.
Just to address one of the questions that was on there, how could the founder of Oakwood College in Huntsville be racist? The same way the presidents of Oakwood College could be racist. From
It's
back in the day, they didn't have. I think the first black president of my history serves me correctly, as I am an Oakwood grad. If it serves me correctly, the first black president I believe was J.L. Moran. And before that, there were white presidents of the colleges and universities, and black students and staff couldn't come into the office in certain instances. So I don't know. Is that possible? You tell me. You'll have to figure that out.
And not just that, but that's irrelevant because you can look systematically, which one guy we're going to look at here in a moment, he's going to harp on, have you read Sister White systematically on this? Meaning looking at all of what she says on the topic. Folks, I'll challenge you tonight, which we're going to look at some of it. I challenge you, do a systematic study on what she said in regards to other races of people and their learning capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Please do. Yeah.
And why you'd want to set up just because you set up a university in a predominantly, colored area doesn't automatically mean therefore you don't have you could want to go in there and be like, oh man, these primitive people, we need to educate them and we need to get them, you can have all sorts of motives. That doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. So now Jason,
Miles,
go ahead.
If I may harp on that was exactly the motive why it was founded. Ellen White helped found a lot of Bible schools and training programs in the South, especially Mississippi, for that very reason, because she supported segregation and wrote extensively on it that they should be segregated. And even in those black churches and institutions, because of her view that blacks were spiritually, morally, intellectually, etc., inferior to whites, that whites should be chosen as leaders in all of those instances, in all of those institutions. In fact, it is because of Ellen White's deep-seated racist statements that there exists racial segregation and black and white SDA conferences in North America. And so that is not something far-fetched. Ellen White was very altruistic as whites were gaining freedoms and liberties, and she saw them basically as, if I may put it this way, cash cows, people who can fund the system and try to reach them to advance Adventism. She makes that clear over and over in how she approached it. And so that is not something far-fetched.
No. And we're going to get into that tonight, so people will see for themselves.
And the receipts are here, trust.
Yeah. So then Jason Thomas, he commented a bunch on the video. We're going to look at a couple of them here. He said, he's responding to me here because I asked him, I said, show us in the Bible. Well, he says, you wrote, show us that race mixing was the chief of sins that caused God to flood the earth. That was my question. Because that was my question in the video, because that was the point of the video. God supposedly flooded the earth because certain races of people had the image of God defaced in them. Show me this from Scripture. So then he says, the Bible says, and quotes, like the person previously brought up, Genesis 6, 1-7. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, for his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and those afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Sorry, I copied and pasted this from one of those sites that has it puts the little letters for the annotations and the footnotes. Forgot to get them all out. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. Fellas, where in there does it say anything about race mixing?
Nowhere.
It's just the assumption, as you're going to see in the next slide, where I highlighted his emphasis to, it's what he emphasized. The race mixing that was being referred to was the sons of God and the daughters of men. There we go. There's the F.D. Nichol argument. You can see that this combination caused evilness. There is a principle of God that says to not be unequally yoked. There again is the F.D. Nichol argument. It was being unequally yoked. God flooded the world because of the results that came from this mixing. In the previous chapter of the book you quoted, Ellen White wrote what she meant. Quote, Seth was of more noble stature than Cain or Abel and resembled Adam more than any of his other sons. The descendants of Seth had separated themselves from the wicked descendants of Cain. They cherished the knowledge of God's will. And then he emphasizes, while the ungodly race of Cain had no respect for God and his sacred commandments. But when man multiplied upon the earth, the descendants of Seth saw that the daughters of the descendants of Cain were very beautiful. And they departed from God and displeased him by taking wives as they chose to the idolatrous race of Cain. Then he continues on to the next page. Again, his emphasis there. The descendants of Seth were called the sons of God. The descendants of Cain, the sons of men. As the sons of God mingled with the sons of men, they became corrupt. And by intermarriage with them, there's that unequally yoked, lost through the influence of their wives, their peculiar holy character, and united with the sons of Cain in their idolatry. Many cast aside the fear of God and trampled upon his commandments. Close quote. Then he says, clearly the race mixing she was referring to was the ungodly race of Cain and the descendants of Seth. Did you consider this context? So it's literally just the F.D. Nichol argument. Did Genesis 6 say anything about being unequally yoked? Did it say anything about race mixing? Did it answer the question? No. This is just Ellen White having to be defended. So you're going to quote the proof text where she supposedly is just pulling proof text from the Bible and then just inserting a bunch of things. Yes, Jason, I've considered the context. I've read this book. Have you? I've talked with you before, and you've told me that you're not very versed on Ellen White. I've read thousands of pages of Ellen White. Have you? Have you? Because you're just using the F.D. Nichol argument, which ironically, in his final comment says, the first one to plead his case seems right until another comes and cross-examines him. Proverbs 18:17. How ironic, Jason. Good job in connecting two completely unrelated quotes. Again, missing the point of why I was quoting both of the things. I wasn't saying that both were talking about amalgamation. I was pointing to multiple things that talk about race mixing. Her comments about refraining from mixed marriages was because of the level of hatred and racism that existed in the 1800s and early 1900s. Again, no, Jason. It was not her counsel. Her comments. It's not her comments. You're missing it, my friend. It's God. God is saying this. That's the issue. God did not give counsel for during the antebellum period that if you intermarry, you're sinning. That's what you're saying. That's what you're defending. I'm sorry, I know I'm getting worked up, but it's laughable. It's laughable that you have to defend this. It was wise counsel for the time. No, it wasn't just counsel. When God speaks, it is authoritative, Jason. That means to go against what God said for just a small period of time, since you're saying it's just a small period of time, it was sinful to do that. It was sinful to go against what God said. It's not just counsel like advice, like God saying, well, I wouldn't recommend this, like a financial accountant. This is God we're talking about, and this is supposedly coming from God, which was the point in my video, is that God did not give counsel that it was wrong to race mix during antebellum slavery, that it's sinful to do so. There's a book called Amalgamation by Francis D. Nichol, provided by the White Estate, if anyone's interested in hearing the truth of this matter. Quote, prove all things, close quote. The irony. So we're going to talk about that tonight, and people are going to see. And Jason, we're going to take you up on your offer and prove all things. And you're right. The first one to plead his case seems right. The Adventist Church pled this first, not me, Jason. You're right. It does sound right. When you just go to F.D. Nichol, who, folks, do you think F.D. Nichol had any bias? He was sent out on a task to specifically deal with this problem. That's definitionally a bias. So we're supposed to go to F.D. Nichol, who was sent out on a goose hunt, on an egg hunt, to literally find a solution for a problem like they're notorious for doing. Investigative judgment, you name it. They always have to pivot. It always has to be some malleable thing. So we're supposed to believe him, but don't believe the people who are analyzing, being critical, thinking, that doesn't sound right. I don't think God is I don't think God is saying that he flooded the earth because of certain races of people. Furthermore, how does intermarriage, brothers, how does being unequally yoked produce a different race of people?
Oh man, and that's the ridiculousness of it, because when you follow the argument up to today, then we should definitely get the same results. If we accept that this amalgamation of races with races, or saved people with unsaved people, Adventists with non-Adventists, Christians with non-Christians, is what Ellen White calls this base crime that produced confused species, that irated God, that eventually caused the flood. That still happens today. Adventists marry non-Adventists, Christians marry non-Christians. Why aren't we seeing the same reaction? Why aren't we seeing that it's still the base crime that warrants total annihilation of the race, with the exception of few that are pure and holy, etc.? Again, it shows you that even their defense does not make sense, because the same things are happening today, probably on a grander scale. Christians are marrying non-Christians on a grander scale. Adventists are marrying non-Adventists on a grander scale. If this is what is being condemned, that brought the flood, that angered God and he could not take it anymore, it's happening on a grander scale. Why don't we see the same reaction to this base amalgamation that is going on today? It just doesn't make sense. And we never see where non-Adventists marrying a non-Adventist produce a whole different race that demands destruction. We don't see where a Christian marrying an unbeliever produces an amalgamated, transmogrified race of people that warrants destruction. We don't see it. So again, following the argument and the solution logically through proves the absurdity of it, because again, it is still happening, and yet we don't see the vengeance, we don't see the flood, we don't see the creation of this grotesque race of people that warrants total annihilation.
Well, and you have to remember too, as we're going to see in the quote, she says that this act marred the image of God in the offspring. So you can't just tell me that being unequally yoked so all people who were born out of wedlock, or all people who the mother's a believer, the father's not, they're unequally yoked, their children have the image of God marred in them? Mm-hmm. No. Nice try. Then we got this here, folks, which this was on a different video. But I thought, this is perfect to conjoin onto this. And before I get to it, no, Adventists, I'm not saying that all Seventh-day Adventists are like this. No, I'm not saying that this guy is a spokesperson for Seventh-day Adventism. But what he says here is consistent with what Ellen White was claiming. That's why I want to show this. And I want people to see the sort of vile and filth that this sort of thinking and sort of thing can produce. So this guy's been blocked from the channel because he's disgusting. But before he got blocked, these are why he got blocked. He left a long chain of comments. He left this on the video of an interview that I had with April Chapman over at the Standard of Truth podcast. April is an African-American woman. And this is what he proceeded to comment on the videos. And this is an Adventist. He says, Mr. Miles, so how many more black women are you going to depend on to get your toxic message out? Firstly, Ellen White made it clear that her writings should be considered as one would scripture, meaning gather all the writings presented on a certain topic, subject, or doctrine and evaluate it in its entirety. Friend, yes or no? The irony. Did you or did you not gather all that was written on the topics you wish to address? Second, if your desperate attempt to spread the word against Adventism, you had to do what black men accuse black women of. It is no secret that black women would jump at the opportunity to speak to white men. You couldn't approach a white woman? Sir, she approached me because she has Adventist family members. Why are you focused in on skin color? I don't care what the guest's skin color is. The person has to be 1, black, and 2, a woman. Well, we've seen how that's panned out because this interview took place a little while ago. It's not possible to be interviewed by a white male. Did you know black men consider black women at the bottom of the rankings in humanity? It's all over YouTube. Don't take my word for it. It's not what I say, but what black men have to say about black women. So you don't have to target the lowest and most toxic of humanity to get your toxic message out, correct? Nice try, Mr. Miles. You and I are the exact opposite. That's the only true thing you've said so far, sir. You left Adventism and joined the Reformed faith. I left the Reformed faith to become an Adventist. Shall we debate the Westminster Confession of Faith starting on page 71 to see how it contradicts other texts in the same volume? No, sir, I have no interest in talking with you. You are vile, disgusting, and it's very obvious that you're not a part of the Reformed faith or the wider body of Christ, because if you were and you were part of my church, you'd be under church discipline. Because this is disgusting. But see, folks, this is the sort of thing, and I'm not saying that this guy's necessarily, it's hard to believe that, well, then again, the internet kind of brings out all sorts of things in people. But people like this probably read the Ellen White stuff and they agree with it. This guy's proud to be an Adventist. Adventist, come get your boy. There's his handle. Public information. Not saying to dox the guy, but disgusting. Disgusting.
Let's see how, if there's any rebuke here. All right. Open rebuke is better than secret love, my friends. So let's see what you guys are going to do. Balls in your court, SDAs.
Nasty. Like, what in the world are you talking about? Get off YouTube, dude. You're getting your understanding of the worth of people off of YouTube, and you're professing to be a Christian? This is why we're addressing stuff like this, Adventists, because of people like this guy. So, with all that out there, now that you've heard the common responses, no, she was referring to being unequally yoked in marriage. No. Like Jason claimed, by race, you have to utilize the word how it was understood in Ellen White's day, which simply meant types of people. Yet, ironically, he doesn't apply that same standard with the word amalgamation, which was utilized in Ellen's day, as we're going to see, to refer to race mixing and beats around, and it referred to certain races of people. Like, that's what it referred to as producing offspring who were amalgamated, a mixture, miscegenation, subhuman. You've heard their excuse that race mixing was in reference to the descendants of Seth and the ungodly race of Cain. You've heard the counsel on intermarriages was simply wise counsel for the day due to political climate. That's all she was saying. That's all she was saying. So we're going to test this. We're going to take a look at Ellen White's quotes as well as statements from a number of her contemporaries, not SDA apologists 70, 80, 90 years removed. And we're going to see how the early SDAs understood Ellen's words. And we're going to show that these modern excuses that SDA apologists give conflict with how others at that time understood the statements. CMB, the floor is yours, sir. And it will be for the majority. I'll have a couple parts to splice in if you don't have the information already in your slides. But if you do, the floor is yours, sir, if you would like to present. You are muted, brother. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Miles, and thank you for allowing us on your platform again and inviting us on. So this will be interesting. Before we get going, I got to shout out the BK Apologist. He's in the chat right now, so shout out to you, my bro. We've been doing this thing online for some years now. And he's actually one of the first few people that encouraged me to share my testimony as a former Seventh-day Adventist. And I had no desire to do this stuff publicly, and I didn't realize that there was such of a need for it, So if you got anyone to blame him. I'm kidding. All right, so love you, bro. And we did this. This is actually a remix of one of the presentation that we did on the BK Apologist channel. So we may not get through every single thing tonight. There's more information to be had. Please check out the BK Apologist channel as well too. This is the title. This is the thumbnail, so you can find it fairly easily. Hidden Race Doctrine, SDA. You put that in your YouTube search bar and you'll find it. Now, before we get going, I want to make sure that we're abundantly clear about something, right? We do not hate Seventh-day Adventists. I don't. Okay. Miles does not. And EJ does not. We don't hate SDAs. Okay. What we don't like is the system. Okay. The system is not, it's broken. It's corrupt. Okay. And if we're going to be honest, we have to be honest and take a good hard look at some things. And before you do that, anything that you buy into, any philosophy, any worldview, any religious freedom, whatever. Okay. You have to be able to make sure that it stands up to scrutiny. Truth can stand scrutiny. Okay. So if you're taking a look at it, do so honestly and see what sticks. Okay. If it's truth, it's God's truth and it can handle it. If it's not truth, some things are going to be found out to be dross and was it hay and all this other stuff that the Bible talks about. Okay, it's not going to stand. So with that said, let's jump right into it. Okay, we're already almost 40 minutes into it, 45 minutes. So let's just jump into it, guys. All right, so this is SD Belief, Adventist.org. And also, for those who say that we are just saying things out of context, in the green at the bottom of your screen, I provide the receipts. That's where you can find them, screenshot them if you need to, right? Watch the stream again, find them, okay? So that's there. So Adventist.org beliefs, this is the gift of prophecy. It says the scriptures testify that one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is prophecy. This gift is an identifying mark of the remnant church, and we believe it was manifested in the ministry of Ellen G. White. Her writings speak with prophetic authority. Y'all caught that. And provide comfort, guidance, instruction, and correction to the church. They also make clear that the Bible is a standard by which all teaching and experience must be tested. Okay, y'all know this, right? This was alluded to earlier. Selected Messages, Book 1, page 27. In these letters, which I write, in the testimonies I bear. And guys, what are testimonies?
Writings of Ellen White, or specifically the volumes of the testimony books.
There you go. Okay, so in general, we talked about the writings. Yeah, I am presenting to you that which the Lord has presented to me. I do not write one article in the paper expressing merely my own ideas. They are what God has opened before me in vision, the precious rays of light shining from the throne. Okay, the precious rays of light shining from the throne, and we're gonna see if these are precious rays of light, and you have to tell me. Okay, so here she says, this is the object in question here, the line in question. If there was one sin above another, which called for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast, which defaced the image of God and caused confusion everywhere. God purposed to destroy by a flood that powerful, long-lived race that had corrupted their ways before him. All right, this is Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, page 64. See it for yourselves, okay? So what's the base crime, guys?
Amalgamation
Of man and beast, Okay.
Yep.
So this is what she says. Now, she also says this: every species of animal which God had created were preserved in the ark. The confused species which God did not create were the result of amalgamation, were destroyed, which were the result of amalgamation, were destroyed by the flood. And since the flood, there has been amalgamation of man and beast, as may be seen in the almost endless varieties of species of animals and in certain races of men. Did y'all catch that? I'm going slow here, okay?
Yep.
Did y'all catch that? This is Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, page 75. You guys can find it, okay? Now, again, precious rays of light from the throne. Okay, now, or from the bookshelf. That's the question. Okay. In the article True Blood, Race, Science, and Early Adventist Amalgamation Theory Revisited by Ronald Osborne, this is in Spectrum magazine. And just to be fair, guys, I tried to find the Spectrum magazine. I don't see that one often. Okay. So, but the Osborne article is available on Academia. So you can find that there. Okay. But this is where it's from here. It says in 1867, 1 year before Smith published his defense of White's words on amalgamations. We'll get to that, guys. Okay. 1 year before, Tennessee clergyman Buckner H. Payne published under the pseudonym Ariel the second edition of his book. The second edition of the book. Okay. The Negro, what is his ethnological status? I have not been able to discover when the first edition appeared, whether before or after Spiritual Gifts. This is Osborne saying that. The quote continues, Payne used a vocabulary of, catch it, crime and confusion, very close to White's, to explain Noah's flood. God could not tolerate the crime of amalgamation. Remember what Ellen White wrote, okay? Payne wrote that this sin of association with beasts that had produced various races. I'm going to continue. But whereas Uriah Smith argued in defense of White's prophetic authority that amalgamated blood is no worse than the blood of any sinner, and that Christians must labor for the improvement of the quote-unquote lower races, Payne heaped vile abuse on those working to raise the political and social standing of African Americans. The states of people that favor this equality, this is Payne talking, God will exterminate. And that ellipsis is in the PDF there. He said, you cannot elevate a beast to the level of a son of God. Okay. Talking about black folk there. When placed alongside Payne's racist screed, some might argue Smith's defense of White's statement on amalgamation thus represented a significant advance in racial thinking for the time. For one thing, Payne does not assume that animal-human amalgamation produced African Americans. He assumes that blacks were created beasts to begin with, so that black-white amalgamations were in fact the original animal-human amalgamations. Uh-oh. Okay.
Wow.
This is Ellen White's Contemporaries. You're talking about this. Okay. Continuing. Payne's use of the term amalgamation should dispense once for all with F.D. Nichol's claim, repeated by a number of Adventist writers since, that in mid-19th century America, the word was not used to describe animal-human combinations. It clearly was. We can finish the stream right here, but we're not gonna, right? This is precisely why White was immediately understood by both her critics as well as Smith to be saying that racial differentiation was the result of animal-human hybridizations. That's on page 9 of our Osborne's article. All right, you guys can jump in there if you'd like to, or
do you have Smith's quote, or do you want me to bring that up right now?
Oh, I got it. Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wait for it then. It's just disgusting.
And CMB, it wasn't just Payne who was speaking like this. There were a number of guys who were literally writing on the subhumanity of whites and blacks and blacks rather, the subhumanity of blacks to whites and Caucasian races. For example, books like Negro what is the black man, human or beast, and a number of them.
Yeah.
We're purporting the same idea. And the same idea surrounding black and white interracial marriages and banning them, the segregation, etc. All of these were floating around. In fact, Ellen White had these in her library as well. So she was drawing from a lot of these books and reproducing their racist statements and ideologies and claiming that they were from God.
Mm-hmm. All right. Miles, I put something in the back chat if you don't mind checking that out here. So Miles is going to post a link to an article from harvard.edu talking about scientific racism. Okay. That's a whole thing. Okay. And its tendrils still cling to this very day. Okay. I work healthcare, and there are a lot of things and assumptions that happen to be in healthcare that are based out of scientific racism to this very day. All right. So y'all need to be paying attention to what's going on. And just kind of as a matter of fact here, Serena Williams, the world-class tennis player, almost lost her life based on some issues that happened. And it's very likely, I'm not going to get into that tonight, but it's very likely that it had to do with her race. So we're not going to get into that right now. We don't have time for it, but it's a thing. Okay. So just trust and believe that for now. Okay. So moving on. So let's get to Uriah Smith's defense here. That's where we were. Okay, so whatever, and this is published in the Review and Herald, 1866 here. Is that said? Yeah, can't read my glasses. All right,
CMB.
So, yes, sir.
CMB. Just before you go into Smith's defense, let's provide some backdrop why his defense was necessary.
Sure, go ahead.
You had several Adventist pastors, thinkers, and evangelists who actually had left Adventism at that time. And the amalgamation issue was one of the main issues they were constantly agitating and pushing to the public as to what makes for a false prophet. So, for example, the Canwright, Snook, and Brinkerhoff, you had several of these respected former SDAs who were pushing this issue out there as proof that she's a false prophet, and who were close associates of her, who were actually saying that it was confided to them, what Ellen White meant about amalgamation, that God did not create the darky, which was a racial slang for black people or the Negroes, etc. And so they were saying that, the visions of Ellen White cannot be from God, and how she's racist and how she views black people, etc. And so as a result of this, Uriah Smith was tasked by the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists to actually write the visions of Ellen White defended. And one of the glaring and most prominent issues was amalgamation of man and beast. And so he wrote this treatise defending a variety of things pertaining to why Ellen White was illegitimate. And he defended what she said about amalgamation of man and beast is actually correct. So that is the sort of background, brothers and sisters, that eventuated Uriah Smith's defense of Ellen White's amalgamation of man and beast.
Well, there you have it, folks. Background information. Okay. Here we go back to the slides. Okay. So this is Uriah Smith's defense. And again, it was published in the Review and Herald. And you can see the date at the bottom. And here it says, quote, whatever race of men we may take, Bushmen, Hottentots, Patagonians, or any class of people, however low they may apparently be in the scale of humanity, which we'll talk about that later, their mental capacities are in every instance the basis on which we are to work, and which we determine whether they are subjects of moral government or not. Then what about all this to do over the charge, which is in itself false, that the visions teach that the Negro is not a human being? What does it amount to? It is simply an effort to create prejudice in the minds of the people, unworthy anyone who makes any pretension to being a Christian or even a gentleman. This is Uriah Smith's part of his answer anyway to deal with it, right? So Ellen White was right. And if we look at the Bushmen, the Hottentots, and Patagonians, however low they may be, right, we can still work with them because they might have some of Adam's blood that's coming later. Okay. And just so we're clear, when we talk about these people groups, we're talking about the Bushmen or the San people in Southern Africa. Okay, they're actually people, not animals. Okay, Hottentots, aka the Khoikhoi people, who also live very close to the Sans. Right. We have the Patagonians, aka the Tehuelches, right? Tehuelches, that's it. Native South American people group. Okay, so they're darker skinned people, and if you notice, all in common, again, they're darker skinned or black people. Again, shout out to BK Apologist. If you check out his channel, we had a stream not long ago talking about Revelation chapter 13 and the beast image that comes out of the earth. In Revelation 13, and that's also based in racism, so you can find that there. And I'm not a CRT practitioner. I don't believe in that. I'm not some social justice warrior. I'm a person that's down for truth. So please check that out, and so your worldview can be put up to the test and see what's what. Okay, great controversy. You know what that says in there. The land was empty. Was the land empty? Find out for yourself. Okay. All right. So some attempt at cleaning this up. Okay, some attempts at cleaning this up. First, this is from the White Estate. What is the general meaning of the word amalgamation? Is it ever used to describe the depraved act of cohabitation of man with beast? Right? No dictionaries we have ever had access to, not even the exhaustive Oxford English Dictionary, indicate that the term has ever been used to describe this act. There is another standard English word that may be properly used to describe such cohabitation. Okay. The primary usage of the word amalgamation through long years have been to describe the fusion of certain metals, and by extension to denote the fusing of races of men. Wait, what? Did y'all catch that? In the mid-19th century, the word was commonly employed in the United States to describe the intermarriage of the white and the Negro race. Okay. The crux of the amalgamation passages is this: amalgamation of man and beast. That statement could be construed to mean the amalgamation of man with beast, or amalgamation of man and of beast. F.D. Nichol defense. In a construction like this, the preposition of is not necessarily repeated, though it may be clearly implied. Just real quick, how can something might be clearly implied?
Yes, oxymoronic.
It's ridiculous. Okay, and if you notice, they're destroying themselves here. Okay, we might speak of the scattering of man and beast over the earth, but we do not therefore mean that previously man and beast were fused in one mass at one geographical spot. We simply mean that the scattering of man over the earth and the scattering of beasts over the earth, though the original locations of the two groups might have been on opposite sides of the earth. In other words, the scattering of man and beast. This is what they want you to believe that amalgamation means. So animals are over here someplace. Human beings are over here someplace. So they're amalgamating by being scattered and then coming together. Really.
How does that mar the image of God?
How is that a base crime of all crimes that warrants total annihilation? Even if it's racism, man, how does a white man marrying a black woman become such a base crime, a heinous act that warrants their total annihilation? Again, it still does not compute.
It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And by the way, EJ, they're saying that you can't hear. Oh, you brought the mic up? Okay. But yeah, this is it doesn't make any sense, this defense. Okay, this is an EGW estate, by the way. So kind of, if you know, the EGW estate wants you to believe that the term amalgamation was not used to denote sexual union between man and beast. That's what they said, right? But it did refer to the fusion of metals. Is fusion pushing apart or coming together? Anybody help me out? Fusion.
Coming together.
Of course. Fusion of metals and races of men, including intermarriage. Hello. So if there's intermarriage, you think a man and wife, if they're married, might have sex every now and again? I don't know.
It's a standard kind of thought.
I don't know. Or maybe you have to save yourself because of the the of animal passions and such.
But didn't they just say
ketchup
that
and vinegar
no?
might you have? Yeah,
Didn't they just say that no dictionary ever used this word in that way?
that's what they said. The same quote. Like it's let's go back. So this is the thing, the white state there.org legacy issues / amalgamation. Just put amalgamation in there and you can find it for yourself. It's crazy. Okay. We mean the scattering of man. No, oh gosh. Is scattering even a viable option for the use of the term fusion?
That's like the exact opposite of what fusion is.
Thank
Fusion
you.
is not a scattering.
Good Lord. And for those in the back that that aren't catching what we're going on, let's go to a dictionary. Okay. Fusion. Okay. The process or result of joining two or more things to form a single entity. Oh, and look, it says amalgamation for people that can't read the small print. Okay. Fusion is the result of joining two or more things to form a single entity, also known as amalgamation. Dummy. Okay. So we can stop with the nonsense. Again, the EGW estate wants you to believe that the term amalgamation was not used to denote sexual union between a man and beast, but it did refer to the fusion of metals and races of men, including intermarriage. Make it make sense, please.
It doesn't say what you're claiming it says, even though it does say what you're claiming it says.
Glad to clear that up. Right. So this is absolute this is what your church is telling you. Okay. Like, okay, fact. There's no definition of amalgamation on the planet that denotes scattering. There is none. It doesn't exist.
Like, give me a break, man. This should show people how desperate of an attempt and a defense this is. Like, come on, man.
It's terrible. Okay. All right. Gotta move on a little bit. Okay. So Ellen White's contemporaries disagree with the current defense proposed by the white estate. Okay. And some folks in her day had questions about the validity of her statements as well. Her contemporaries. Okay. So Spirit of Prophecy. Okay. This is G.V. Kilgore, and he writes in the Review and Herald on November 28th, 1878. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1, page 78, that's the quote we just read, was referred to and ridiculed by a Baptist minister. He said that what Sister White said about amalgamation of man and beast was utterly impossible. Wait a second. What was the standard defense from the Ellen White estate here? That it just meant fusion, right? Intermarry,
which is a scattering,
right? So you can't intermarry or scatter or fuse. Okay, just so we're clear, keeping up. Okay, so I referred him. This is Kilgore talking. I referred him to Johnson's New Cyclopedia, pages 1040 to 1040 and 1042, that he might learn for the first time, because you don't understand Mrs. White. Yeah, you might learn for the first time, if he never knew it before, that quote, allied species are capable, as a rule, of pairing and producing offspring. End quote. Miles, how do you produce offspring? Keep it PG. But.
Again, I am one of these mixed race amalgamated species, so maybe my thinking faculties are not the strongest. But I believe after having a son myself, it's through intercourse.
Yep,
that's
cohesion.
There you go. Okay, offspring, and that under the influence of man, mongrel races. Hello, pay attention. Mongrel races readily arise and are indefinitely sustained. What? Just exactly what Sister White says. So, my friends, we have to ask, was Sister White referring to pairing and producing offspring? Kilgore thinks that.
And he wasn't alone. Yeah.
No, he was not. People have to understand, for almost 90 years, 83 years to be exact, this was the standard understanding and defense of all Adventists. In fact, when it was first proposed April 1931 by George McCready Price that they shift the wording by adding the additional of so as to not make it look like she was actually saying man and animals interbreeding, it caused a massive controversy in the Adventist church that D.E. Robinson, he was Ellen White's personal secretary for years. He stepped up and immediately shut the argument down. He refuted McCready Price's article and said it did violence to what Ellen White meant because he personally knew what Ellen White meant being her secretary. And he went through Ellen White's literature, what she had to say on the issue, and proved that she did mean amalgamation of man and beast to refer to humans interbreed with animals. Mm-hmm. And brothers and sisters, for the next 16 years until 1947, when the issue blew up again, no one dared try to respond to and refute D.E. Robinson. He settled the issue. The entire Adventist church was settled on the matter when he refuted this first reinterpretation of man and of beast to make it seem like of man refers to different types of humans and of beast refers to different types of beasts. He refuted that. But then it had to come back because they were going to lose credibility in 1947 if they did not embrace the of man and of beast, which has become the standard SDA interpretation and argumentation today. And we'll see why that is. Continue, sir.
CMB, really quick, to support what EJ just said, I'd like to share a quote from a primary source.
Oh, yeah.
A primary source, folks, of, okay, we got to flip through here all the way to the end. I want to actually share two quotes here. This is from B.F. Snook. B.F. Snook and W.H. Brinkerhoff. EJ mentions this in his book, by the way, folks. I'll put the link to that in the description down below. Volume 3 of his book completely blows the lid off of this claim, by the way, with all of the primary sources. Mm-hmm. So I want to share one of the quotes here from a book they wrote called The Visions of E.G. White, Not of God. This was in 1866. Ellen White wrote this when, EJ?
1864, when she first made the statement. They defected and left, and in 1866 responded. That's just 2 years later.
2 years later, this is what they write in their book on page 4. Again, you can look at this book online. The PDF is available online. Just Google The Visions of E.G. White, Not of God, B.F. Snook. Mm-hmm. They say on page 4, quote, "These visions teach that the Negro race is not human. This charge they deny, but we will let the reader decide for himself. Here is what she says. Since the flood, there's been an amalgamation of man and beast, as may be seen in the almost endless varieties of species and in certain races of men." Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, page 75, the quote we looked at. "But what are we to understand by certain races of men?" Remember, this was an Adventist, a primary source at the time of this being written. "She has not informed us in her writings, but left us to fix the stigma of amalgamation where we may see fit. But the interpretation has come to light. She told it to her husband, and he made it known to Elder Ingraham. And he divulged the secret to the writer, that Sister White had seen that God never made the darky." That's a primary source, folks. But we're supposed to go with F.D. Nichol, 90 years removed, over a guy like this, who you just have to say, well, he was lying. Okay, well, whatever. That's a primary source. I'm rolling with the primary source over 90 years removed. He says that Ellen White confided in James, her husband, and James spilled the beans because he couldn't keep the secret, that she said what it meant was God never made the darky. Another quote, just to show you how the word amalgamation was used at the time of Ellen White writing this. Abraham Lincoln, rather popular guy, known by quite a few people in the United States, you'd say. What does he say? This is from the Collected Works of Abraham Lincoln, Volume 2, page 406. He said this in 1857. So around Ellen White's time, who had books in her library that used the word amalgamation very regularly, and it referred to what exactly we're talking about tonight, Abraham Lincoln uses this word as well in the same grammatical construction as Ellen White did. This is him speaking about the political climate of the day. Quote, there is a natural disgust in the minds of nearly all white people to the idea of the indiscriminate amalgamation of the white and black races. And Judge Douglas evidently is basing his chief hope upon the chances of being able to appropriate the benefit of this disgust to himself, if he can, by much drumming and repeating, fasten the odium of that idea upon his adversaries. He thinks he can struggle through the storm. He therefore clings to this hope as a drowning man to the last plank. He makes an occasion for lugging in. Well, the point is instead of having to read all this, the point is he uses the phrase amalgamation the same exact way that Ellen White did, because that was the way it was culturally used at that time. So when these SDA apologists tell us that we're clueless critics and we're not using words the proper way, like the word race, they try to say, no, by race in that day, it meant class of people. It didn't mean ethnic races. Well, okay, the word amalgamation at that time clearly meant miscegenation.
Right.
And that beast was a regular term to refer to colored people. So the amalgamation that was happening, that she was talking about, was between white people and colored people.
This is going to get a whole lot worse in just a minute. Okay. So, again, Kilgore in his defense of Ellen White refers this Baptist minister to Johnson's New Cyclopedia. Now, when BK and I first did this stream a couple years ago, I was looking all over the place to try and find it. Could not find it in time for that thing. And I still would periodically look for it, but it has to be what you would consider divine timing, if you will, providence, that sort of thing. Look what I found. Look at what I found. Okay. Johnson's New Universal Cyclopedia, a scientific and popular treasury of useful knowledge, Volume 3, Part 2, the very one that Kilgore is referring to. It is available right there for your viewing pleasure on Google Books. Check it out. Okay, so when he is talking about amalgamation, right? Kilgore he is dealing with this entry here on page 1040 and 1042. He's dealing with the entry of hybridization or hybridity. Okay, so I'm just going to read a few quotes from here. Okay, treats the issue of dissimilar kinds, hybridity treats the issue of dissimilar kinds of animals and plants in other words, the offspring of parents which belong respectively to different varieties or species. Few subjects have been so much misunderstood or have given rise to so many superstitions as this. In the olden times, and indeed until quite recently, pay attention, guys, among the educated as well as among the ignorant, the grossest credulity prevailed respecting the possibility of, get this, offspring between the most dissimilar forms. Let's keep reading. That doesn't sound like crossbreeding species is possible, does it? So let's see what they're talking about here. Same article. The belief prevailing that women could become pregnant from intercourse with beasts. Okay? Laws have been framed condemning to death the parents who were judged guilty of the crime of such unnatural commerce. In 1543, for example, a woman in Avignon, France, was delivered of a child which was thought to look like a dog. And this supposed resemblance was sufficient evidence that the mother had intercourse with the dog. And she was consequently condemned with her, I love how they said this, quadruped paramour to die at the stake and was accordingly executed. People legitimately thought that you could have intercourse with animals and so forth like that. And again, when we look at Kilgore and we look at what's his face, Uriah Smith's defense, they'll cite Leviticus chapter 18 against bestiality, right? And say that's the reason why God said so. Okay.
And people have to realize that this was before what we call modern science.
Yes.
They were saying this because there was not a lot of scientific data, which is what EJ pointed to earlier, that in the 1940s and 1950s, there were great strides in this area, which caused the SDA Church to panic. And this got brought back up as a blip on the radar.
Mm-hmm. Facts. Okay. Now you have to ask yourself, why would they, EJ, I'm sorry. You want to say something, brother?
No, I was saying, right, that's correct. And remember to, even historically coming up to that time, you're talking about Greek mythology was very popular as well.
Yes.
And so Greco-Roman mythology with the various human-animal hybrids, like the Minotaur and all of those, they had pictures of those, and these were prevalent beliefs.
Yeah.
And the half horse, half man, and all of these things were very prevalent in the minds of these people.
Mermaids
and
and that, right?
mermaids,
androgynous people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so people who had accentuated features, they believed were the result of humans and animals interbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, brothers and sisters, don't try to judge this thing from today's advanced scientific knowledge and all of these kind of stuff. These were primitive people, and of course, Ellen White, everything she read and social ideas she hopped on and concepts of people, she attributed divine inspiration to all of it.
Yeah.
And so she was pulling and imbibing all the nonsense of the time and attributing it to God, and that's what the problem was. And SDAs believed it with their whole heart that these were true, these were factual, and they were finding quote unquote scientific literature, the science of the day, and all of that, to say, well, this is true, and she is true because she's agreeing with science here. But by the time real science got in the picture, a lot of these myths and theories were being debunked one after the other. That's why she writes so voluminously about the ills and the ghastly effects of masturbation and all of these different types of stuff, because that's what they prevalently believe. But again, as we study more advanced science, it's all buncombe. All right, so we have to keep that in mind.
Yep. All right. So, and we'll keep that in mind as far as the science is concerned, because this is contemporary stuff. And again, I invited everyone to look at that link that was provided before to the Harvard article about scientific racism. If you have the stomach for it, go check it out. You know, that includes phrenology, racism in different ways and stuff like that there too. Again, not a CRT guy, not a social justice guy. So just, you see the shirt, it's King Jesus all day. That's where I'm at. So
well, I was just about to say, I want to emphasize that you're not just using like cultural buzzwords when you're saying these things. We're talking about like the real deal thing here, folks.
All right, keep on rolling. And what's up, Madeline? What's going on, sis? All right, so let's go on here. What would they think? Okay, why would they think this way? Okay, so again, look at what she said. Since the flood, there's been amalgamation of man and beast, as may be seen. Okay. So you can see the amalgamation because people look a certain way, right? And people, according to
quick injection to magnify your point, CMB.
Yeah.
First, she says the flood came as a result of the amalgamation.
Right.
God wiped out those PCs and those people who amalgamated. And then we see, she says, now this is after the flood now. Since that time to the present. And so, which means there was not a time that it stopped.
Right.
Are you catching that?
Right.
There was not a time that it stopped. So throughout the eras up to this point, and you can look all around you, this is happening. And then they start to give tangible examples and people groups as to who are expressions of this amalgamation. Go on, bro.
Yeah, I was just looking at and shout out to Dr. Alan Davis. God bless you, man. And I was just looking at Fred Simmons' quote here, or his comment. It said that the angels won't come into there with us. If you're as old as I am in SDA, if you went to the movies, the angels didn't go with you. So that's another stream. Let's go. Let's move on. Right. So so Ellen G. White is trying to fix things out. Again, going back to the Osborne article that we saw earlier. Okay. And it might seem like it's all over the place, guys, but this is why we have to kind of do a shotgun approach so you can see everything together. Okay. Systematic, if you will, my friends. In 1901, the Review and Herald published together with a front page article, quote unquote, "Judge Not," by Ellen White, a letter from a concerned Adventist asking the question, can amalgamated blood be saved? Wait a minute. Can amalgamated blood be saved? Blood that was fused?
I thought it was just intermarriage. So I guess if an unbeliever and a believer has a child, well, the child can't be saved. Because we're talking about intermarriage, right? That's what Ellen White was saying with her quote.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the human-animal hybrid. That was amalgamated blood.
Good grief. Look at this. The editors, now A.T. Jones and Uriah Smith, replied that persons with amalgamated blood were certainly not beyond salvation, and further, that the amalgamation spoken of by Sister White did not violate or invalidate physiological law. The difficulty was that science showed that hybridized creatures, i.e., there it is, the offspring, such as mules, which are the result of sexual union between horses and donkeys, were infertile and could not perpetuate their species. However, they continued, quote, might it not be that sufficient results of bestiality would appear as to have a trace of amalgamation. Results of bestiality. And you guys don't have to be gross, but you know what that is, okay? Without destroying the power of generation. The amalgamation spoken of by White is seen in what is called certain races of men. This shows that deterioration was not recognized to such a degree as to eliminate the human and transform any such offspring into beasts. Oh my. In so many words, the flagship journal of the Adventist Church at the turn of the century was simply upholding the church's long-held understanding based upon White's statements and Smith's vigorous, if not authoritative, interpretation and defense of them nearly 4 decades earlier. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The assurance offered to concerned members in 1901 is in the 1960s. One, that White spoke authoritatively, not only on a religious, but also scientific matters. And two, that amalgamated persons might still qualify as human beings and subjects of philanthropic concern, so long as they had at least some of Adam's blood in their veins, regardless of whether or not that blood had been tainted in the ancient past with the blood of animals. So, my friends, how in the world do you get the blood of animals inside the blood of humans if amalgamation does not mean amalgamation?
Yikes.
Oh, I told you I was going to get worse. Okay. Quote ain't even done yet. Here we go. But the fact that some races were degraded or quote unquote lower than others, as White had alluded, and as Smith had plainly declared, was still taken as quotes as self-evident by most Adventists, as it was by most Americans and Europeans of their day. The Hottentots, or Southern African of Southern Africa, who Smith had cited as quintessential examples of amalgamated beings, were the subjects of some particularly sensational commentary in the Review and Herald throughout the 19th century. Now what?
Okay. Man, real quick, just on this. Folks, I want you to remember, do not lose this from your focus, because the Adventist church is going to try and do the sideshow, the circus over on the side. No, look over here. Look over here. This is being attributed to God. Mm-hmm. God said this through Ellen White. That's why the thumbnail of this video has the little added speech bubble on there. No, God made me say it, because that's the pivot that they take. Well, no, like W.C. Willie White, her son, tried to say in spiritual gifts in somewhere in the page 300s, 323 or something like that. He tries to make the claim, well, God guided her in what she needed to remove and change and when to take something out and when to add something in. Oh, it's God's fault she's saying these things. This is being pinned on God. It's not just Ellen White saying this.
Oh, boy. It's bad, though. This is not good.
Horrendous.
Okay, so let's look at some relatively recent examples of sensational commentary of amalgamated species. Again, if you're as old as me, you might remember a couple of things that you might have seen in the grocery checkout counter. So one of which is National Enquirer. The other one, Weekly World News. Okay, so a dolphin grows human arms. Okay, so yeah. Things like this. Okay, half man, half dog baffles doctors. Okay, a bat child escapes. Okay, why am I including stuff like this? This is essentially what people were thinking was happening in her day. Okay, and I'm going to prove it here in just a second again. Okay, back to Johnson's Encyclopedia. Okay, same entry. Although, quote, although such beliefs have now been driven to more obscure quarters, they are by no means extinct and indeed are still very prevalent. In fact, extravagant accounts of animals of, again, mongrel origin are frequently published in the daily and weekly newspapers. Hello. Okay. It may be therefore be advisable to enter into some detail in advance to deny the truth of most of the reports. Okay. Doc says it reminds you of the X-Files. Yeah, exactly. Right. Under the general designation of hybrids are embraced all those forms whose parents belong to different varieties or species. Whether the offspring is fertile or not, the word hybrid is thus essentially similar in its meaning to the Anglo-Saxon term mongrel. Okay. Do you remember when that word was used previously? Okay. Continuing, French writers have classified the forms embraced under the general term 3 categories. I'm sorry, that was the way it pulled up when I did it in the PDF here. Sorry, guys. All right, so hybrids, mules, and métis. Okay, métis hybrids, mules. Okay, métis originally specially employed to designate the offspring of an Indian mother by a white father. Well, I thought it was 2 different races of humans, and has been extended as a generic term to humans and plants of mixed origin, i.e., the offspring of 2 races or varieties of the same species. Okay, so there's no hiding from this, guys. Okay. Last couple quotes from that encyclopedia here. Repeated and prolonged critical observations and experiments have amply demonstrated that i.e., belonging to decidedly different families, that fruitful union, there you go, is impossible between animals or plants or of widely different species. Such is only possible within comparatively narrow, although uncertain limits. We may therefore at once dismiss as utterly unworthy of belief the many reports of offspring from such forms that have been published by even accredited writers of natural history in past times. Such examples as the alleged case of hybrids between a hen and a duck, and a possum and a cat, a boar and a camel, an otter and a rabbit, an otter and a sheep, an otter and a cat, a raccoon and a cat, and especially women and apes, dogs or other animals. Y'all see what's happening here?
So when they say, no, she's talking about, because this is where they added the word of there in Ellen's quote, to say, no, it's talking about amalgamation of humans, and then there was amalgamation of beasts. It wasn't the two things together.
Right.
No. Look here, folks. Women and apes.
Women and dogs.
Right. You saw that lady in France was killed in the 1500s, right? Because her baby looked kind of doggish. This is terrible. Okay.
And remember this too, when they want to use the argument, oh, no. When she said races of men, you need to use the definitions of that day. That's what this is.
Here you are. How much more in that day can you get?
And again, to give an example of races of men, in Uriah Smith's 1868 defense of these statements of Ellen White, he highlighted the wild Bushmen of Africa, some tribes of the Hottentots, and perhaps the Digger Indians as the amalgamated races of men that she was referring to. Examples of amalgamation she was referring to.
Right here, fellas. I'm going to start a little bit earlier. He says, now we have ever supposed that anybody that was called a man was considered a human being. The vision speaks of all these classes as races of men. Yet in the face of this plain declaration, they foolishly assert that the visions teach that some men are not human beings. But does anyone deny the general statement contained in the extract given above? They do not. If they did, they could easily be silenced by a reference to such cases as the wild Bushmen of Africa, some tribes of the Hottentots, and perhaps the Digger Indians of our own country.
Yes.
He says, does anyone deny the general sentiment and statement that the line between animal and human has been blurred by such people like the African Bushmen, the Hottentots, and the Digger Indians? That's how he understood this. He was a contemporary of Ellen White. He knew the whites. He was the SDA Church's first theologian. That's how he understood what she was saying.
And it cannot be argued that Ellen White was ignorant of his defense, his consistent defense, because, again, the General Conference of SDA at that time were more than happy to endorse his defense, to publish it, to urge people to buy his paper, and even the whites themselves, for camp meetings that year, they took and sold 2,000 copies of Smith's book defending Ellen White's amalgamation and given the examples that he gave that she is right, it is scientifically factual, and she's a true prophet.
Here's the receipts, folks, for what EJ just said. Before Smith's quotes were published, the month before, his statements were published in July. The month before, June 12, 1866. This is what was published at the end of the Review and Herald article that day. The official organ of the SDA Church. What was resolved? That we, the members of the General and Michigan State Conference, fellas, what role does the General Conference play in the SDA Church?
It's
what
the
did
highest,
Ellen White?
It's the highest. Was it assembly?
When the General Conference is in session, it is the highest governing body with the most authority on earth, and your own personal opinions, depending on the decisions they make, must be set aside. The General Conference and the Michigan State Conference have read a portion of the manuscript read, which has been prepared by Brother Uriah Smith. This is where that quote from Uriah Smith is coming from. That's the paper they're referencing. In answer to certain objections recently brought against the visions of Sister White, we do by here express our hearty approval of the same, Another thing that's been resolved, that we tender our thanks to Brother Smith for his able defense of the visions against the attacks of their opponents. So who was that in 66? We just looked at B.F. Snook earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What was B.F. Snook making the charge against? What was the objection that he was making? She's saying that Darky wasn't made by God.
Mm-hmm.
In response to that, resolved that we tender our thanks to Brother Smith for his able defense of the visions against the attacks of their opponents.
Mm.
We would further state that in preparing these answers, we have had no consultation whatever with Sister White. Now get this, folks. We've had no consultation whatever with Sister White, nor received any suggestion or explanation from her on any point. We take the visions as they are published and base our explanation of any apparent discrepancy on the language as it stands. So there we have it.
Busted.
This confession completely demolishes the modern arguments and reinterpretations of Adventist apologists. Uriah Smith and the General Conference leaders and pastors read Ellen White's statements as they are and concluded that she indeed meant that humans interbred with animals and certain races of men were produced. As we saw, Smith provided some examples of dark-skinned people who were created due to this amalgamation. It's a wrap. It's over.
And it's the same thing we do today. We take the visions as they are, we read them in the language as they are written, and we understand and come to the conclusions that they intend to convey. So it is not us who are butchering and destroying and being the clueless critics who are perhaps having aphasia, don't know what words mean anymore. It is the SDA apologists,
right,
who from the 1940s, for expediency sake and to save the face of the prophetess and the church, who had to reinterpret, and with the insertion of McCready Price of 1931 with a little of, to try to make it look like she is saying a different thing to save themselves today. It is them who are doing that, who are butchering her, who are doing violence to the text, and who are not taking her as she reads in order to save themselves. It's not us who's doing that. We are doing exactly what the General Conference did and came to the conclusion that they did. And Ellen White, of course, they were so elated with, along with her husband and the others, with Smith's defense, that they were more than happy to sell 2,000 copies of Smith's defense of her statements.
Yeah, and in my video, I mentioned that real quick, CMB. I mentioned that in the video that I uploaded a couple weeks ago about, Juneteenth, Adventism, and racism. Mm-hmm. And James White comments on that in the August 25th, 1880, I don't remember exactly what it is, but the quote is there in that video where he says he read over the entirety of the manuscript.
Right. And
then him and Ellen went and sold copies of White's book. It's super long, the title. It's like The Visions of Ellen G. White and something that Uriah Smith wrote that made its way into this Review and Herald article. They sold 2,000 copies of this book. And James said he read the manuscript and he was happy to go out and do so. So yeah, this idea that, Ellen never endorsed his words. Oh, yeah, right. She just went and sold 2,000 books, which at that time,
right,
that was a lot. They didn't have Amazon.
Right. And in person, you know what I mean? So you get the celebrity culture that's there anyway, James and Ellen White, the visionary, I can buy a book, I can touch her, I can kiss her hand, I can touch the hand that the inspired pen sits in. Come on, guys. You know what I mean? Like this is really, it's terrible situation. And we're not trying to make light of this. It is what it is. Okay? It is what it is. Let's finish this up real quick, guys. All right. So let me get over here again. So yeah, the one of the main problems again with Kilgore's citation of John's Encyclopedia. So that's why I'm going back to this again, and we're gonna just bury this right here. Okay. Allied species can quote procreate. That's what he said. Okay. Allied species can quote procreate, and that was his defense against that Baptist minister. Now, here's the problem: among invertebrates, There are less known and determined cases, but hybrids have been obtained between different species of bees, butterflies, etc. And many intermediate forms found in a state of nature have been supposed to be hybrids. The results thus far obtained from all these various departments may be summarized as follows. 1. Allied species are capable, as a rule, of pairing and producing offspring, and this capability is in definite ratio to the degree of their likeness. Okay, did you catch what the problem is? This is among invertebrates. Are you seeing this? Okay, so Dum Dum couldn't read very well, right? And was just, like many people do to this day, looking for confirmation bias. Okay, so if you are not well, all of us are online right now, so get in your Google search bar, get in your Bing or whatever you like to use, and look up what the term confirmation bias means. Okay, and this is what you'll see. Okay, so white Jesus is concerned here. All right, let's go from here. All right, quick recap of the facts that we've looked at so far. Johnson's New Encyclopedia, pages 1040 to 1042, does not agree with Kilgore's defense of Ellen White's statements about amalgamation. This encyclopedia entry it demonstrates the idea of hybrid dog people, and others like it are fabrications and scientific impossibilities. But Ellen does not realize this. Okay. Kilgore's defense fails. F.D. Nichol's defense fails. The E.G.W. estate defense fails. What's the other guy? McCready Price? His fails. And Ellen White's teaching here is 100% false. 100%.
Yes, sir.
No.
Yeah, and I want to address
100%.
this guy really quick here in the comments. This Mark Anthony, he is a regular here that likes to cause contention in the comment section. He says, does anyone here have a PhD in biology? No, Mark, we don't need a PhD in biology, just like the GC session didn't need to have a PhD in biology to understand what she was saying either. All right,
Facts.
CMB, continue.
Thank you. Oh, gosh. I was going to say something about third grade education, but I'm going to stop. All right. Ellen White was influenced by current events and plagiarized an open racist position to posit amalgamation between man and beast was possible. You saw that, right? Ellen White meant exactly what she said. Ellen White attributed these horrific things to God in contradiction to the scriptures, and these wicked statements influence how SDAism is practiced to this very day. SDA apologists often say things like Ellen White was a champion for the rights of Black Americans and those who were disenfranchised. She taught equality between the races. Did she? No one is capable of clearly defining the proper position of the colored people. Testimonies, Volume 9, page 213, paragraph 4. Nobody is capable of clearly defining the proper position of the colored people. I didn't know we had to have those. The colored people should not urge that they be placed on an equality with the white people. Oh, there you go. Right? The relation of the two races has been a matter hard to deal with, and I fear it will ever remain a most perplexing problem. Ever. So far as possible, everything that would stir up the race prejudice of the white people should be avoided. There is danger of closing the door that our white laborers will not be able to work in some places in the South. This is from the Southern work and also in testimonies here. I know that if we attempt to meet the ideals and preferences of some of the colored people, we shall find our way blocked completely. The work of proclaiming the truth for this time is not to be hindered by an effort to adjust the position of the Negro race. And mind you, this is in like when the days of the Morning Star that's going down the Mississippi River and all this, right? Should we attempt to do this, we should find that barriers like mountains would be raised to hinder the work that God desires to have done. Okay, so yes, this was in the antebellum South there, okay, and or maybe so around the time of the war, maybe before the Civil War, something like that, but the point is that they were trying to get down there and preach their message. We're going to see a couple things in a few minutes here.
One thing on that real quick, just because there's a common defense that they try to give to this to say, no, she wasn't talking about that as like human beings, they're not equal. It's just that right now with the way that the political climate is, they shouldn't go against the way that the law is because it will hinder the way for us to make progress.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, this is coming from God. Abolition was headed and spearheaded by Christians. The government does not determine what God then says is right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a track record in scripture of God ever, I don't know, having people stand up against corrupt governments?
Right.
It was God's counsel. No, we don't want to stir anything up. Yeah, because God doesn't have a track record of ever stirring anything up politically.
Right.
That's just a silly defense. That's just a silly defense. This in
and
conjunction with all of her statements.
On top of that, Miles, this argument about the time and the dangers, you have the Quakers.
Mm-hmm.
The Quakers had no prophet. The Quakers did not have the clout that the SDAs had, yet they stood squarely against racism and segregation. And I think in the 1940s, they won a Nobel Peace Prize for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't even bring up that silly argument about just, for peace sake. I mean, this was dehumanizing.
Mm-hmm.
This was very dehumanizing. It was cowardice. And Adventists had racist ideologies and views about blacks simply because of these dehumanizing statements that Ellen White made about black people. Yes, she self-contradictorily made some nice, pretty statements about blacks. I document all of that in volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
Where she died for the equality and the humanity and what you call it now, reparations and those kind of things. But all of those good, pretty statements were based on her altruism.
Mm-hmm.
That now she's able to benefit from these people and her church can benefit from them. But after making those statements, the latter part of her work and ministry is these sort of racist statements that she makes about black people, even so far as saying that in heaven, segregation and racism will stop because blacks are going to be white like Jesus.
Oh yeah, that's coming.
The skin color will be bleached.
Right.
And so miss us with that foolishness, and none of it is from God. It is not true. It is not from God.
Facts.
Go ahead, CMB, sorry.
Yeah, no, what these brothers were just talking about is right here. Where demanded by custom or where greater efficiency is to be gained, let the white believers and the colored believers assemble in separate places of worship. Again, if it's by the law, well, we shouldn't break the law.
Well, and real quick.
Okay.
Folks, in Galatians 3, sorry, CMB, yes. I'm gonna say something.
You're right on top of it. Yeah, go ahead.
Folks, you had the exact opposite of this going on in the early church. When you read Galatians 3, you need to understand when it says Scythian, barbarian, this is not just like a caveman. Most people, when they hear the word barbarian, they think like a caveman. That's not what's being said there. There were racial tensions at that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did Paul say, well, because there's political tensions around this right now or cultural tensions, we should separate our assemblies and not worship together? Noodle on that.
Yeah, no, and to go further, right? I believe it was Galatians also where Paul chastised Peter for not wanting to act differently between when the Judaizers came, right? Paul says, "I was sticking to his face." Right? You know, this is ridiculous, right? Okay, Mark Anthony, whatever you want. So you missed all the rest of the stream for the last hour and 47 minutes, bro? Okay, whatever. Right? So, I mean, feel free. Anywho, so this is kind of one of those things that you have to recognize that being in the presence of Gentiles and eating with Gentiles, likely eating their foods, right? Against the food laws, the dietary laws of the Torah, right? these men, when the Judaizers come, Peter wants to act all high and mighty, right? And now being a respecter of persons, if you will, right? And Paul withstands into his face. You can find that in the book, right? So again, is this precious race of light from the throne? Right? So this is what you have to ask. And the answer is no. I don't know what it is, but it ain't light from the throne. Okay. No one is clearly capable of defining the proper position of the colored race, she says. Meanwhile, the scripture says this. God says, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, that's the human beings he just created, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Let's skip over to Acts 17. What does this say? Then Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus, okay, and said, men of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every respect. For as it wasn't, as I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar on which is inscribed to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. Catch it. The God who made the world and everything in it, just like we read in Genesis chapter 1 there, okay? He is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in shrines made by hands. Neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath. And all things from one man, he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God and perhaps reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. Ellen White can't figure out the proper position of the colored people. And I'm here to tell you what the scripture says, that everybody that draws breath, that is an image bearer of God, that's everybody on the planet, is of one blood. There is one race, the human race.
No amalgamation, no man and beast, no image of God being defiled because of being unequally yoked. We have Jason here in the comments. He's now commenting saying that we're not being fair with Ellen White. Okay, Jason. Okay.
There's an objection to the marriage of the white race with the black. All should consider that they have no right to entail upon their offspring that which will place them at a disadvantage. They have no right to give them as a birthright a condition which would subject them to a life of humiliation. The children of these mixed marriages have a feeling of bitterness towards the parent who have given them. It's funny how Ellen can know what every kid from a quote unquote mixed marriage can feel, right? Crazy. I have a feeling of the bitterness toward the parent who have given them this lifelong inheritance for this reason. If there were no other, there should be no intermarriage between the white and the colored races. Okay. Manuscript 7, blah, blah, you can read it. Okay. Again, the problem with this idea of mixed marriages is that it ignores what this says in Acts 17 and amongst other places. God has created all human beings. There's no mixed marriages. Okay. We're all one blood. We're all one people.
And not just that, but the excuse that, it was just for that time. No, folks, the point is God did not say this. God did not say, because antebellum slavery is going on, I'm beholden now to this political climate that's going on in 19th century America. No, that's the point. This is not coming from God. And Ellen White claimed that she never wrote a sentence of heresy, that it was God speaking through clay. It wasn't merely her own opinion, and to go against the things that she wrote was to insult the Spirit of God. Give me a break.
You have no license from God to exclude the colored people from places of worship. Oh, that's nice. Treat them as Christ's property, which they are. That's nice too. Just as much as yourselves. Yes, they should hold membership in the church with the white brethren. That's nice. Every effort should be made to wipe out the terrible wrong slavery which has been done them. At the same time, we must not carry things to extremes and run into fanaticism on this question. Some would think it would be right to throw down every partition wall and intermarry with the colored people. But this is not the right thing to teach or practice. Southern Work, page 15. Yes, no. We shouldn't throw down every partition wall. Just keep some of them up. Just a couple. My friends, and Mark. Okay, God bless you, man. As they say in the South, boy, bless your heart. All right. Okay, so we can get into stuff like worship styles and whatever the case is at the moment, but there's a couple things that we can look at from here, but you get the idea, right? So the whole point, guys, that we're talking about is amalgamation. The idea, before we get off into the rest of it here, the idea is that the thought of the day was that Black folk and any quote unquote colored person, which means anyone who wasn't white European, right, was the result of amalgamation between man and beast. That was the zeitgeist of the day. That was the thought process. Many people thought that the idea of subhuman species was around. Look it up, okay? The idea of the curse of Ham was running rampant. If you don't know what that is, please check that out. It's terrible. The idea of, and it pervades to this day, right? So you have white supremacist cult groups like the Christian Identity Movement and all some other things like that are pseudo-Christian. They're not real Christian, obviously, organizations, but they're pseudo-Christian organizations. And they believe and teach the curse of Ham. They believe that Jews over in Israel are not Jews, right? They're not human beings, okay? They believe all kinds of stuff like that. And same thing with certain camps of Hebrew Israelites believe that that white people are not God's children. Okay, they believe all kinds of stuff, and so there are real world implications of this. Okay, and if you hold to these bad ideas and bad doctrines, what can happen is you'll have comments like Mr. Mark Anthony, you can't stop talking right now, and you're not saying anything that has any kind of sense, my friend. So this is a problem in where you hold to certain viewpoints, and Ellen can't be wrong, even if it violates the law of God, even if it violates the laws of logic, even if it violates laws of science, right? All of that, so yeah, take from that what you will.
I want to respond to a comment here really quick because we have Jason in chat, and he said, I would love to hear how you all would have counseled people in the 1800s. Jason, you're still not getting it, my friend. This isn't just Ellen White counseling people. This is coming from God.
Precious.
I don't know. I don't know how to say any other way, my man. You need to drop this. That's the reality of it.
These guys are hacks. That's what it boils down to. They are hacks whose hearts are impervious to the truths, to the facts of history, of context, the scripture, and they have too much to lose to accept that they are wrong on an issue and they are following a false prophet, and therefore repent and believe the gospel. That's all they are hacks.
Too, by the way.
My counsel, Jason, I would like to think my heart right now is saying that, I don't know. I'm not in the situation. So obviously I can't speak to not being there, but I would like to think my disposition. Well, I mean, I'm a guy who goes out to abortion mills and seeks to evangelize those at the abortion mill and walk with them and do street evangelism, etc. My heart's in a place where I would like to think that I would have been on the abolition side, because there were people at that time who were abolitionists, Christians,
like Quakers,
spearheading.
like
correct.
Quakers and a lot of Christians.
This idea that, Ellen White was just, no, she's claiming to speak on behalf of God. You're claiming to be God's last day church. You're the principium of truth. Don't give me that. Don't give me that nonsense that you're no better than she is. No. That's not going to pass off for blaming this on God.
Right.
No too quokey fallacy here. No too quokey.
Yeah.
Right. Shame. Right. So let's answer the question though. What would we have counseled? Well, if I was alive in the 1800s in the United States of America, I'd probably be a slave. Okay. So I would want to be free. Okay. That's where I stand on that situation. Okay. But the answer to your question is very simple. What would you counsel the people of the 1800s? Get saved. How about that? You know, submit your heart to the Lord and read your scriptures, right? Submit your heart to the Lord and let him melt racism from everybody's heart. That's what I would counsel people to do, because there was no good science back then. People were just winging it. Phrenology, really? I'm gonna measure skull sizes and see whose head shapes would promote or denote intelligence. We're gonna look at people's nose shapes and lip shapes to tell who's right or who's more ape-like or less ape-like. People's butt shapes. Come on, seriously? Skin tone? Like, hold on one second, real quick. And so those kinds of things there, right? If we look at those scriptures, the plain reading of the text that we just put up there between Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 28, or whatever I just read there, and then Acts chapter 17, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, you know what? All human beings are God's people. All of us need to be to submit our lives to Christ. Period. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that. So yes, you can look at it from an outsider's perspective now. We can look at it from 21st century lens and see all kinds of stuff there. But no matter whether it was legal or not, there was no point in time where chattel slavery was right. No. The scriptures denounce selling people and kidnapping people. Hello.
And stealing. Okay,
that was punishable by death. Okay, so you need to really, really take an honest look at this thing. We've been talking at this for almost 2 hours now. Okay, you can't sit up here and talk about context, bro. You can't.
When he says, and by the way,
go ahead.
Jason is supposed to be a PhD or a doctor. I'm not sure which field he's a doctor in, but he's supposed to be one of the leading SDA apologists today.
Good Lord.
Of the official, yes, Advent Defense League. But as you listen to these guys, they are nothing but hacks. Hacks who need a Damascus Road experience, who need to hear the gospel of Christ and become saved.
Okay.
When he says here, real quick, he says here, wisdom comes from God. Why is it hard to see that what she said was to preserve life? Again, Jason, do you not understand that real people, EJ's already mentioned one group, the Quakers, who literally preserved life, literally by going against what your prophetess said was God's wisdom. No. Just leave them where they're at. Just leave them where they're at. That'll preserve life. Don't cause a stir, because we want to make sure we can spread this Adventist poison all over the world, and we don't want to cause any feathers to be ruffled. So we'll just go with the flow. We'll just go with whatever the times are so that we can have an inlet to then, whenever it's convenient, get our message out there. It's not about preserving life. Don't give me this nonsense that it's about preserving life. That is not true.
And Miles, is it really preserving life when a white man's horse was being treated better than a black man? When black babies were gator baits? Is that really preserving life?
Telling them that they're a subhuman.
Breaking and white blacks have no rights. They're brutalized, they're murdered at the whim of a white person. Is that preserving life? Telling them that their value and their worth and issues about them just it's complex, can't be understood, and just leave things as they are, to be dehumanized and brutalized incessantly. Is that preserving life? Having them transported from one place to the other on these precarious journeys, packed up like sardines on ships, based on these ideologies, and working them to death in the field, where their average lifespan is about 30 to 40 years of grueling labor. Is that the preservation of life? Is that even life? Come on, man. I let me not get emotional and riled up about this. But again, it goes to show that these people are hacks. They are hacks who are so overtaken by these false ideologies that whatever it takes, they must defend these false prophets and whatever garbage that is spewed out of their mouths. And it is unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Ah, man. And again, the whole point is not only does this come from God, allegedly from Ellen White. Okay. The point is that if you view the scriptures as is, human beings are human beings. If we looked at that and we actually lived by that in the 1800s, there would be no concern about intermarriage. Okay. So you wouldn't be putting your life at risk for marrying somebody because they look different from you, or they're from a different country, or have different culture, or whatever the case is. Do you understand? Like that's the point. So I'm trying, like I said, there's no reason to get riled up and stuff like that there, about this. This is just simple logic. If we looked at what the counsel would be, let's read the scripture as is. Okay. There's not going to be a problem. Okay. Meanwhile, we have Ellen White here. No, I did not say blacks are hybrids, Jack. So please, if you didn't watch the show, what you can do since you're watching on YouTube, right? Just hit the back button. Just rewind it at the beginning. You can do that, right? Just watch and see what the arguments we're making, please. Okay. So for there, I'm not being facetious. I'm a little frustrated right now. It's been 2 hours and I'm tired. So here we go. So Ellen White says, quote, "You are the children of God," and she's addressing a group of black folks in Vicksburg here. You are the children of God. He has adopted you, and he desires you to form characters here that will give you entrance into the heavenly family. Remembering this, you'll be able to bear the trials which you meet here. In heaven, there will be no color line, for all will be as white as Christ himself. Let us thank God that we can be members of the royal family.
No, CMB, she's not talking about race here. She's just saying that we'll all have a glow like Jesus does. It's like a white light glow.
Oh yeah, and your character will be white, like spotless, right?
That is nonsense. Again, contextually, she's talking to a newly formed Adventist church here in Vicksburg, Mississippi. These people, when you look at the historical context and records, were being slaughtered.
Yes.
They were being brutalized. Again, she mentions of the trials they were bearing. They were being persecuted, segregated, dehumanized, and the worst things were happening to them. She came there to preach a message to encourage them to endure their trials and burdens. And in the midst of her encouragement, she sought to let them know that these conditions they are currently facing here will not be in heaven, because they are going to have white skin like Jesus, and therefore there'll be no occasion for the racism they're experiencing, no occasion for the segregation, no occasion for that persecution. That is what is happening. And when you look at Ellen White's consistent use of color line in her writings, and again, I've gone through all of this at length in volume 3, she is talking about segregation. She's talking about literal skin color. So no, she's not talking symbolically here about character and glow and this and that and the other. She's talking to a group of people who are being emaciated, destroyed, emasculated, lynched, and the whole 9 yards because of their skin color. They have embraced the Adventist faith and still experiencing all of these things because of their skin color. So she thought to buoy them by letting them know in heaven, these conditions will change because your skin color will change. That is what is historically going on there.
And notice Jason's comment here. Again, completely misses the point. You show that quote, but not the quote where she says whites and blacks will be in heaven. Jason, we never said that she said blacks won't be in heaven. We literally just said the opposite. They'll be there, but they'll be as white as Jesus. This is another perfect example for you to see, folks. They're not able to actually deal with what's being said. They have to just throw out the only defense that they have. and make these wild assertions and whatnot when we just said the opposite. No, they'll be there, but they'll be as white as Jesus. And yes, she says in heaven, there'll be no color line. If she's not talking about race, why even say there'll be no color line? Oh, my goodness.
And here, one more thing too. Can you put that back on there? If it's too late. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So we have this quote here, where you don't show the quote, where she says whites and blacks will be in heaven, right? So not only are you saying that on one hand, whites and blacks will be in heaven, but on the other hand, the blacks will be as white as Christ himself. How can you tell the difference of who's who? Right? How can you tell? How can you tell the difference of who's who? If the black people are going to be white, how can you tell who's going to be white? Okay, or who's black, or whatever the case is, or which nation, tribe, kindred, tongue, and people, and all that stuff from Revelation. This is the kind of nonsense that we're seeing here every single time that we talk, right? And the funny thing is, we're talking about we were accused earlier of not paying attention to the context of the times that this was put up. Not paying attention to the zeitgeist of the day, all this kind of stuff, right? Well, here's the thing: the term color line, when it was used in the mid 1800s to 1900s, or whatever the case was, only had one real meaning, and it was dealing with a race.
Segregation. Yep.
Okay?
Segregation.
A matter of fact, into the 1900s, if you all don't know who Ruby Bridges is, you need to look her up. Okay? In the lifetime, I'm not going to tell you how old my sister is, but in the lifetime of my family members, okay, my parents and others who just, in their lifetime, 1960s, right? Ruby Bridges, 6-year-old girl, had to be escorted to elementary school with the U.S. National Guard, or the State National Guard. Okay? The Army had to escort a girl to school in some of your lifetime as you're listening to this right now. Some of you are old enough to know this or remember this. Okay? So I don't want to hear anything about that. Like, at all. Okay? Y'all want to act a certain way. You want to act like we don't know what we're talking about. Context. You're misquoting. You haven't read anything in context. And we have been on here for 2 hours. And I read a huge entry from the encyclopedia that Kilgore cites as a defense. And he didn't read it correctly. And you can see it ad nauseum. This is nonsense, guys. It's laughable that this is what you have to boil down to. Either this came from God or it didn't. That's what she said. So you have to decide. Okay.
And factually, it did not come from God.
Facts. Okay. All right. Okay. So again, this is my school here. Remarks were made by J.E. White as to the necessity of establishing an industrial training school within easy reach of Nashville. He stated that such schools were contemplated in the instruction we had received in the testimonies, and that such institutions were very valuable in bringing young men and women into proper training, which would give them the best opportunities to receive the truths of God's word. He stated that in the works of the Huntsville School, that's Oakwood, many such young men and women were received, and that 9 out of 10 who were brought under these proper influences received the truth and became firm in it before they finished their course of instruction. More than this, many of them consecrated their lives to missionary work among their own people. That's the point of why Oakwood was established. It's not because she was some altruistic person who just wanted to see people saved and so forth. No. There was work to be done. And they couldn't get in by themselves.
It was about exclusion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying it wasn't about inclusion. It was about exclusion.
Correct. All right.
I want to comment at Jason here again, who's again going crazy in the comment section. You're defining these terms with modern definitions. Jason, you need to hit the rewind button, buddy. You need to hit the rewind button. And you don't need to use that argument because you tried to argue with me that no, you need to use the definitions of that day when it came to races of men, yet you yourself were not using the definition of that day, which we spent about 45 minutes on, for the word amalgamation. So if you want to play that game, buddy, go back and look at the definition of amalgamation from back then and get back to us.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna read a couple of things. The term color line was originally used as a reference to the racial segregation that existed in the United States after the abolition of slavery. An article by Frederick Douglass that was called "The Color Line" was published in the North American Review in 1881. The phrase gained fame after W.E.B. Du Bois and so forth and so on. Okay, repeated use in the book 1903 book "The Souls of Black Folk." Okay, again, all of these things are related to Ellen White's time. I'm going to go further here. LibraryofCongress.gov. Drawing the color line. 1860s to 1890s baseball. Americans began playing baseball, and it talks about black folks and white folks not being able to play together because there was a color line. I'm just reading stuff off here. University of Washington. Just Google color line 1800s. Reading along the color line. NAACP reports from Black America in 1916 and 1917. Right? In its early years, The Crisis, the NAACP's monthly magazine, edited by W.E.B. Du Bois, sought to where's that? I lost my page here. Sorry, guys. I lost my page here. But anyway, that's the point. Okay. Black Ohio and the color line. Okay. As a brilliant examination of race relations. There's a JSTOR article here. Drawing the color line. By 1800, 10 to 15 million blacks have been transported as slaves to the Americas. Okay. Tell me how this doesn't have to do anything with race. Again, please.
He lost the plot, bro. He's now saying, as you see, it was all about segregation and its meaning. Right, Jason, so it had to do with race.
We know.
Jason, you've lost the plot, my man. You've lost the plot. The whole thing you were arguing initially was that color line doesn't have to do with race. Now you're admitting it does have to do with race, but it was segregation. My man, come out of the deception. Come out of the deception, man.
Yeah, I think we're done. I think we've killed that horse here. But and we talked about regional conferences before. You guys know what that is, right?
Yeah, the black Dr. Davis was talking about that in the comments earlier, saying that they still have black and white conferences.
Mm-hmm. Sure enough, right? And we talked about that on the stream I did with the BK apologist. So please go check out his channel. It's called The Hidden Race Doctrine of the SDA. And we talk about regional conferences and how those came to be. There's a tragic story of Mrs. Lucy Byard. It is no joke. It's a terrible situation, again, along the color line. She was denied entrance and treatment at a local hospital in the 1940s in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, she passed away about 3 weeks after the whole incident there. But again, this is real history. Okay, this is recent history. And again, why are we talking about this? Because it comes downstream of these comments and these ideas about amalgamation. Okay, that's the whole point. We can do this all day for weeks if we wanted to. Okay, there's no need for it at this point. This thing is indefensible. It's unbiblical. It's ungodly. And it's terrible. Like, I don't know what else you need. What needs to be said at this point?
I mean, we didn't even look at all of the quotes tonight.
If I may just give a brief synopsis of why they had to change the meaning and understanding of amalgamation. And so by the 1940s, again, the science was very clear that there cannot be any sort of interbreeding between man and beast. Now, there's an Adventist gentleman by the name of Gordon Shigley in 1982. He wrote an extensive paper entitled Amalgamation of Man and Beast. What did Ellen White mean? And he gives a solid history of that too. And in the 1940s, why Adventists were forced to adopt McCready Price's interpretation or face decimation. And so, despite all that was happening and what Ellen White had said and the racism that existed, blacks and whites were still intermarrying. They were still falling in love, for one. And the science was against Ellen White. And so a great controversy swirled in the Adventist church surrounding the implications that blacks descended from human and animal intermixing. And so the question was, has God revealed to Ellen White and Vision that blacks were not fully human? That was a huge controversy. And this also had implications for her infallibility. Up to that point, Adventists were unanimous that Ellen White was infallible. So whatever she said, medically, scientifically, spiritually, whatever the case was, it was infallible. And so science was proving her wrong. What would they say about her infallibility? And so two Adventist biologists, Dr. Harold W. Clark and Dr. Frank L. Marsh, they got together to have a debate on this issue. Harold Clark was for the historical view, and Frank Marsh was for the new interpretation that would save the face of Adventism. Now, just before this debate happened between a select few of Adventist presidents and white estate people, big shots in the church, Frank Marsh actually had met with the GC president at that time. I think he was Mick Elhaney, to explain to him the gravity of the situation, and that if they do not embrace his new interpretation of the faith of the church, they are going to suffer a great and horrendous loss. And Ellen White's credibility would be. And so that is how this whole thing unfolded. And so when they got together to debate, brothers and sisters, even though Frank decimated, not Frank rather, Harold Clark decimated Frank Marsh's position and new interpretations, they had no choice but to embrace them. And so after Frank Marsh's new interpretations and positions were accepted, they began to spread it among the church. And in 1951, when F.D. Nichol was commissioned by the white estate to write Ellen White and her critics, he requested all of Marsh's papers, arguments, and stuff he had done on the issue, and he used all of that, fine-tuned them, and put out there as the new interpretation. And that is why, to this day, these new and twisted reinterpretations of Ellen White on Amalgamation of Man and Beast become the sacrosanct fact and truthful statements or interpretations. And every SDA apologist continues to repeat them. That is the truth of the matter, brothers and sisters. It is not that they read her and historically and contextually conclude them. They had to do a lot of reworking to save the church, just as they did from their beginning, all kinds of new spins and interpretations, so as to save themselves from destruction, save Ellen White's credibility, etc. And that paper is available on the Adventist archives. You can read it for yourself. A lot of these hack SDA apologists, they've not even read it. They don't even know these things exist. It's also recommended in the LNG. Read these things for yourself. Educate yourself on these matters and stop allowing yourself to be deceived by these false ideologies.
I have up here Thunder's book, Hiding in Plain Sight, Volume 3. I'll put the link to that, folks, in the description box down below, where he absolutely blows this out of the water. thousands of pages dedicated to Seventh-day Adventism. But here he talks about in his book what he was just mentioning, this paper by Shigley. And you mentioned what Shigley's understanding was before the pivot, but you didn't mention exactly what it was. So here it is in his book. And he says, this is Thunder talking. Given these facts that we just explored, what caused the change of interpretation in 1947? So you've mentioned that date a number of times tonight, 1947. Remember, F.D. Nichol's book came out in 1951. So 4 years after this. Shigley gives some insights as to why this happened. He said, quote, controversy swirled around the implication that blacks descended from the sexual union of humans with animals. Had God revealed to Ellen White in a vision that blacks were not fully human? Question mark. Close quote. This was a controversy that just would not die. The implications were undeniably racist and grave. Jason, I guess all of your pioneers, everyone prior to F.D. Nichol, Shigley, Kilgore, they were all confused. They were all confused. None of them knew how to read Ellen White properly. They missed that it was talking about intermarriage. Everyone did until F.D. Nichol came along and he was sent on a specific mission to find a ghost under the rock. When you look for a ghost under every rock, you're going to find a ghost under every rock. That's what he was sent out to do. He was sent out, hey, come up with an excuse for this now. What can we do to essentially deal back the blow that we're getting? There it is. Like he said, you can check out Shigley's paper. It's online. It's in the Adventist archives.
I just posted the link from archive.org, so you can grab Shigley's paper from there. And also, most of us, if not all of us, have the PDF here. So if you want it, just email us and we'll get it to you. Yeah, so it's no problem.
Absolutely.
So you can see it for yourself. So if we're reading out of context, please, just point it out to us.
Yeah, folks, I encourage you to go back, watch this again if you need to. Follow the historical chain for yourselves. Mm-hmm. Then you ask yourself, when you hear the SDA defenses to this, who's looking at both sides, the whole spectrum of things? And who's just, we want to cut off before that period and just focus in on this new area here, 90 years removed? You go look at the sources. You see who the clueless critics are. It's not us. It's not us. So, fellas, any last words that you would like to share? I know that we've been going for about 2.5 hours here, and so I'll let you guys say anything that you'd like to close with, and then I will sign us off here from what I hope will be a beneficial night for days, years, weeks to come.
I'll say what I always say. I love y'all with the love of Christ, even if I disagree with you. Okay. My concern for everyone is very simple. It's about truth. Is it true or is it not true? Is what has been said accurate in terms of what Ellen White wrote, in terms of amalgamation of man and beast? Are the defenses defensible, historically speaking, and also in terms of science and all that? Okay, you have to decide for yourself. There has been ample evidence here from Ellen White's contemporaries, both inside and outside the church, as what is meant by amalgamation, what she meant by amalgamation of man and beast, and what her contemporaries would have understood by the term amalgamation of man and beast. It's that simple. And so what I would recommend for anybody else is just be honest with the evidence. What does it say? And if you want to believe that what she says here about amalgamation between man and beast isn't offspring, and you can make sense of that defense from the E.G. White estate, then God bless you. You're more confused than me. You're smarter than me. I'll leave it on the floor. You can have it. Okay. But for the rest of us who can read and who can discern what's being read here from merely just what it says in the literature, then you have to look at what she says here and take into consideration that she says it's from the throne of God. This is light from precious rays of light from the throne of God. And if that is your God, who says that people who bear his image are actually not his image bearers, and there should be no interaction with them, either through intermarriage or anything else. We didn't look at the stuff about leadership and whatever else like that tonight. No need for it. But if you can look at that, and that's the God that you serve, I don't have any dealings with you, and I can't look at you as a brother in Christ, because the God that I serve has made all human beings in his image, one flesh, of one blood. We are all humans. We all belong to him. And so my prayer for all of you is that you would bow your knee to King Jesus, right? That you would acknowledge him as Savior and as Lord, and be part of the family. That's my question and my prayer for you.
Well, as for me, I'll simply say, CMB and everybody who's listening, we do these things out of love and out of concern for people's salvation, their socialization, their mental health, and holistic development. And as you can see, these things are indefensible. These teachings, beliefs, doctrines, and ideologies, they are wrong, and there is no sensible way of defending them. And so embrace the facts. Acknowledge that you have been wrong, you're misled. Embrace the facts, repent, embrace the gospel, and be saved. Enjoy the freedom and the liberty that comes with embracing the biblical gospel, that comes with embracing Jesus Christ and living a holistic human life that he would want us to live. Hanging on to these false prophets and these ideologies for their life is not going to do anyone any good in the end. And so I hope that what we shared would have educated a lot of you, would have inspired you to do your own research again. In volume 3, I deal with these things extensively. I go through all of the arguments, all that they have written on the matter, and I show how indefensible and how wrong they are in light of biblical and historical truth. And so I hope that y'all will take heed, y'all will be educated, y'all will be equipped, and y'all continue to serve the God of Scripture and not this God that Ellen White and the Adventist Church have created. God bless y'all.
Brothers, thank you so much for being here. As always a great time. I'm sure this will not be the last time, Lord willing, that you guys will be on the show. So thank you. I'm going to sign us off here and close things down for the night.
Thanks for having us, brother.
Yeah.
Blessings, bro. Every time.
All right, folks. So there you heard it. Hopefully that's beneficial. I hope that will, again, like I said, show you who is looking at the whole of history versus who is isolating and contextualizing history. Wanted to respond to a couple statements I hear in the comments here toward the end. It's like comments like these. I think you should invite the other side to have a cordial discussion about this. That's why we started with comments, folks. If you haven't watched the whole show, I encourage you to go back to the beginning. We've done that, folks. We've done that. You're talking to former Seventh-day Adventists here. We know what the other side says. That's the whole point of me showing comments at the beginning on the video I made from a couple weeks ago, is because we know it. We know it. We know FD Nichols' arguments. We literally just showed you the history of the development of the position. You guys, you have to get over this. You got to get over this. This shows your fidelity is to the Adventist movement. It's not to Jesus Christ. It's to the Adventist movement. You have to defend these things. You're not able to just say, yeah, that's despicable. That's disgusting, and move along. You have to defend it and come up with these crazy excuses that only make it worse. Not seeing that the primary issue is you're attributing this to God. You're saying that God said these things. It's not just merely Ellen White. God said this. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. God did not flood the earth because certain races of people had the image of God marred within them. You can try and spin that whatever way you want. You can try and make it sound as soft as you want. Oh, no, that's talking about being unequally yoked. So all the people today whose parents were unequally yoked, the image of God is marred within them. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And it's sad that we have to do a stream like this. But this stream is going to live on. The facts are not going to change. The people who are unbiased, who come to this and see this, say, wow. They don't have to go through all these mental gymnastics. The only people that have to do that are the folks who have to defend Adventism tooth and nail, because they know if you start asking the question on this or any of the other possible options, there's a lot here. It opens the floodgate to say, what else was she wrong about? Oh no, now we lose our mark of being the remnant church. It's time to get serious about this, folks. It's time to get serious about this. If you're an Adventist, be objective with this. Go check all the resources that we talked about tonight. We talked about a lot. We were not just using naysayers. We were predominantly going and doing exactly what one of the sources, for example, said to do. A pastor at that time defending this, saying, no. What Ellen White's statement's talking about was that offspring were produced through the act of bestiality, which is forbidden in Leviticus 18. This idea that, oh no, it was talking about mixed marriages, being unequally yoked. Okay, so all the Adventists misunderstood it for 90 years. Okay. Tomorrow, big announcement live stream. Not going to be super long, but we're predominantly going to be taking questions after a little, I guess like a teaser, if you will, we'll play. Highly encourage you guys to be there. An anomalous Friday stream. We don't typically do streams on Fridays. Big announcement. Big things coming. And it involves you. Yes, you. We need you guys. Because what we're going to be discussing, talking about, the vision moving forward, lots of cool things in store. Lots of cool things, possibilities, potential. But we have to have you. We have to have you guys. We have big opportunities to make a big splash. A big splash. We need you guys. So tune in tomorrow. Going to be talking about some good stuff. Next week, my friend Chris over at All Things Theology is going to be on the show. We're going to be talking about sola fide. The Adventists claim that they affirm sola fide, and, they like to claim, oh, we're heirs of the Reformation. Yeah, you're going to see that's not true. So don't lump the Adventist teaching and idea in with us, at least not classical Protestants. Do not saddle us with that. So that should be a great show. We also have on Thursday, we'll see if he shows up, the first Adventist that has been brave enough to step up to the plate. He will have up to 15 minutes uninterrupted. He is going to give his best defense for why Satan is typified by the scapegoat of Leviticus 16. Then, after he's done, we will examine and go to Scripture and see if his, the Adventist Church's position stands up to the biblical text. So that should be good as well. Few other things down the pike as well. Nothing finalized, so I'm not going to get into that stuff. But as always, the call, as the Adventists would say to us, is that we need to come out of her, my people, referring to the whore of Babylon. And we would turn that back to them and say the exact same thing, except not about the whore of Babylon, but Ellen White. Adventists, come out of her, my people. Believe the gospel. Come to know the true Christ, his gospel. Find freedom in Christ. It is amazing. And the Adventist Church is not dishing that out, sadly. So come out of her, my people. Until next time, as always, God bless.